Hi, and welcome back to State of the Nation, New Zealand. It's been a while since I've had time to put any videos together, and I've been debating whether or not to make this one, but I think a lot of people do need to hear this. We've got a lot to cover around the lockdown, the government's response, and what the future holds, so let's dive right in. The title of this video sums up where we are right now, in the eye of the storm. We've weathered the actual virus a lot better than most. New cases are low and we're all sitting at home itching to get back to work and get the economy back on track. Most people are looking only at the number of new cases and have no idea just how hard the battle ahead is going to be. So we're in the eye of the storm, things are reasonably calm, everyone is safe at home and feeling like we can just about get back to normal. But it is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Why is that? Well, the amount of money in our type of economy isn't nearly as important as how much that money is moving. You can think of it like a pond where the volume of water doesn't stop it going stagnant. It's the flow of the water that keeps from stagnating. And well, we're far better to have $1 billion circulating, being spent and respent every week than $100 billion just sitting in bank accounts doing nothing. So stagnant money is a problem, and the strict lockdown to stop the virus at all costs, and that really does mean at all costs. Almost overnight, most of the economy was frozen. For anyone watching this from outside New Zealand, the important part to note is that while we have done a world-leading job of halting the virus, we have also done a world-leading job of halting the economy. Seriously, if a type of product wasn't deemed essential by the government, then we haven't been able to buy it, even online. No hardware stores, no way to buy paint or tools for home projects under lockdown, and until recently, we weren't even allowed to buy board games online to pass the time. So by and large, if it wasn't groceries from the duopoly of supermarkets or paying your rent and utilities, then it didn't happen. Even butchers and fruit shops couldn't trade and had to dump stock. Trade Me, that's our equivalent to eBay, halted all sales. The rest of the world probably doesn't appreciate just how much New Zealanders have been restricted in order to crush that curve. So the intensive lockdown that stopped us from being able to buy anything, it has done a wonderful job of flattening the curve, but it does mean that our economy is almost entirely stalled. In other nations, businesses, well, they've been restricted, but still operational. And that means that cash is kept flowing to at least some extent. Here in New Zealand, we are talking about the majority of businesses having literally zero revenue, and in many cases having to dump stock. The government has been reasonably generous in handing out wage subsidies during these forced closure times, but that does nothing for the other costs and overheads that are mounting, and without any income to pay for it. It was announced that we'll be going down from level 4 to level 3 next week, which does allow for many businesses to try to reopen. Businesses such as restaurants, they are going to struggle a lot as they try to convert to delivery-only models, and that's if they reopen at all. What we'll probably find is that many businesses will eagerly reopen and just find that revenues are a fraction of what they were before, maybe 20-30% of pre-lockdown levels, and then after that we'll see a lot more closures as businesses realize that that is unsustainable. People always tend to halt non-essential spending after a shock like this, and many will be surprised at just how hard it'll be to claw revenues back. This comes back to the point about circulating versus stagnating money. Even if everyone was to be paid as normal in the coming months, and that in itself is a very long shot, the change in spending habits alone would be devastating. But when that's compounded with the job losses, that means we are actually in for a pretty bad time. Think about $1 that you spend, say, on a plumber. That dollar then gets spent again at a store, which then goes to the employer's wages, which goes to somebody else, and so on. That $1 that you spend may account for $50 or $100 over a year in spending. So everybody holding off on spending after a shock has a very magnified impact. The Treasury's predictions are 26% unemployment in the worst case scenario, but that's probably fairly optimistic. Once businesses try to reopen and find that spending is a fraction of what it used to be, we'll see a lot more layoffs and closures, and that will result in less spending money, and well, you end up in a vicious circle. There's a couple of ways that you need to do. Couple of things that you need to do in order to keep this from spiraling out of control. Firstly, you need to make more money available, and the government's not doing too bad there. They are furiously printing money like most governments. Now that's generally a bad thing, but that's preferable at this time to instant collapse. The money printing, that'll offset the reduction in spendable money in the short term, and the loans and credits that people would be spending will be replaced by that printed money. And with a bit of fine tuning, you can try and get the balance right and keep inflation and deflation under control. The second factor though, that's a lot harder. That's getting people to spend like we did in 2019. Without those kind of levels of spending, we'll keep seeing businesses go under and jobs lost, because our style of economy relies on consumer spending. Less spending means less jobs, that means less tax revenue, and that makes it harder to sustain government borrowing or even pay down the debt that's already accumulated, and that can lead to printing more money, and well, we all know how that goes. So the point here is that it is going to be very difficult and a very fine balance to restart the economy after such a sharp and total freeze. Right now, we're comfortable in our bubbles and really can't see what's coming because it's not so bad right now at this point. So how does the government's report card look for handling this whole situation? Well, Jacinda is really popular right now, and any criticism gets met with fairly stiff resistance regardless of merit. But overall, it's actually not that great. If you just look at the results of flattening the curve, then, wow, fantastic job. If your only metric is reducing spread in a country that already has infections, then full marks. The fact is, though, we're an island nation. We had the perfect opportunity to exercise some really strict border control and then carry on being productive and exporting like normal. If we'd done that, we would be in a really strong position globally right now. As it went though, we actually had to have online petitions demanding the borders be closed before anything serious was done. What? We were told that border checks were being ramped up, but then saw videos of people waltzing through customs without so much as a thermometer pointed at them. There has been a lot of criticism as well of the lockdown being too strict, and well, that is generally correct in that businesses should have been able to continue trading if they could do so safely, rather than the default position being not allowed to trade without government approval. It's likely that those who support the strict lockdown and focus purely on case numbers will be in for a bit of a shock when it becomes apparent that the economic crisis to follow dwarfs the actual viral pandemic. So was the lockdown too much for the economy? Yes. There was zero balance between keeping the country running and controlling the pandemic. Now, it's important to not to take this as a suggestion that the virus isn't real or that it isn't deadly for some, because it is. But the reaction to the pandemic, how we've done it, it's likely much more dangerous than the virus itself, and it's being fueled by media intent on panicking the population for more clicks with scary numbers. If the news was filled with stories of impending economic collapse, then public opinion would probably be the opposite to what it is now. But media bias and activism replacing journalism, that's a whole separate topic and another video. So while many will staunchly defend the strict lockdown, those that understand a bit more about how economics and business work, they'll have a good idea of what's going to come next. And unfortunately, a Labour-Green coalition is probably the worst possible combination to shepherd the recovery. We've just seen Deborah Russell, a senior Green MP, suggesting that it's actually the fault of business owners for not being prepared enough to withstand the government halting the entire economy. The ignorance is pretty astounding, and it shows a total lack of understanding when it comes to economics and business. If that is the level of our supposed leaders, then we are in for a really bad time.